This is the most mysterious black box on the plane. Few people know that it is actually red, but inside it hides the darkest moments on the aircraft. Once it is brought back like this, it indicates that a disaster has occurred. All questions need to be unveiled through it. This is the black box, recovered from a plane flying from Dubai to Paris. 2 days ago, this plane unfortunately crashed into the Alps, and all 300 passengers and 16 crew members on board perished without ever sending out a distress signal. The cause of the accident is still a mystery. To investigate this tragedy, the Aviation Accident Investigation Bureau immediately took action and first unlocked the pressure-resistant outer shell of the black box. They then removed the internal heat-resistant and shock-proof protective materials, revealing the innermost anti-immersion layer. After removing this layer, they finally extracted the storage chip inside. Locke, the chief audio analyst, is exerting all his efforts to analyze the clues in the recording, but when everyone is expecting the truth to come to light, he mysteriously disappears. In this emergency, his assistant Matthew courageously takes on the highly demanding task, and Matthew not only has extraordinary auditory abilities, but also an almost obsessive pursuit for the truth. He relies on the recording accurately captured the events in the cockpit during the crash. Initially, the pilot descended to 380 feet as directed, and at that time, a flight attendant entered with food. The cockpit situation seemed typical, but after the attendant departed, the communication turned staticky, likely from interference, causing unbearable screeching in the headset, leading the pilot to remove it. Soon after, as the attendant returned to the cockpit, the aircraft suddenly descended, and the control tower's calls received no response, leaving only the tragic cries for help in the cockpit. Although everything seemed normal, Matthew's keen hearing detected unusual signals. He increased the frequency of the last audio segment and applied noise reduction, instructing his colleagues to remain silent. Finally, he heard a faint sound. Matthew promptly informed his boss of his observations. He conjectured that an unauthorized person had entered the cockpit, possibly a zealot. The likelihood of a terror attack was high. During the press briefing, Matthew presented his analysis, summarizing his findings from the audio. The dialogue in the control station's cockpit was ongoing when the door swung open to reveal hastened footsteps. Certainly, this noise wasn't emerging from the desolate city. Matthew presumed a security breach, recollecting the lavatory door's movement near the cockpit just moments before. The trespasser must have concealed themselves in the lavatory beforehand, biding their time to access the cockpit. Subsequent inquiry into the passengers revealed a devotee likely linked to a radical group, corroborating Matthew's deduction. Just as the air authority was about to conclude the case, Matthew received an unexpected phone call, providing a crucial clue. A victim had left a voice message for her husband just before the plane crash. But when Matthew obtained the recording, he was shocked to discover that the message was left at 7:56, while the crash happened at 7:53. This meant the message was sent 3 minutes after the plane crashed, which seemed impossible. Matthew was puzzled and returned to headquarters with many questions. However, his superior told him that it was normal for there to be discrepancies in flight radar records. Due to network signal delays, the industry recognizes a maximum time discrepancy of 8 minutes. But Matthew raised another question. In this recording, he heard, "It's impossible." Confused, Matthew returned to headquarters full of questions. However, his boss told him that it was normal for the flight radar to record the time error. Due to the delay of the network signal, the maximum error time recognized in the industry is 8 minutes. But Matthew raised another question. In this recording, he heard a commotion, as well as the sound of the cabin door and a broadcast. But in the recording of the cabin call in the black box, these two voices were absent. And in this broadcast, he heard that the captain seemed to have issued an emergency landing order. According to the regulations, this kind of instruction will only be issued in case of mechanical failure. The leader also listened to the recording, but he could only be sure that he heard the word emergency, but he didn't hear the word forced landing. What's more, the results of the investigation have been published, and the leader doesn't want to cause new waves, so he urges Matthew to complete the closing report as soon as possible. However, Matthew's spirit of seeking the truth prevents him from doing so he goes alone to the warehouse where the wreckage of the plane is stored. With the help of photos of passengers on social media, he observed the suspect. Listening to the recording of the black box through headphones, Matthew recreated the scene in his mind at the time of the incident. He speculated that the suspect did attempt to go to the front end of the plane, and eventually. In the recording, Matthew replayed the scene of the incident in his mind. He speculated that the suspect indeed tried to go to the front of the plane, but was ultimately blocked by the serving cart. When he reported this inference to his superior, the superior believed he was overinterpreting the situation, thinking a serving cart couldn't stop a terrorist. This reaction left Matthew feeling very helpless and disappointed, reminding him of the missing Locke. Although the police had intervened in the investigation, Locke seemed to have vanished without a trace. Matthew learned from colleagues who had worked overtime with Locke that he had been working alone late into the night on the night he disappeared. Suspecting Locke's disappearance might be related to uncovering some secrets, Matthew quietly infiltrated Locke's office and discovered an unfamiliar address through an email, along with a note containing a password. Matthew drove to the address. After ringing the doorbell for a long time without an answer, he chose to climb over the wall and enter. This was indeed Locke's private residence, and using the password from the note, he accessed Locke's computer, only to find all files had been cleared. Just as he was ready to leave disappointed, he noticed a car parked in the garage and took the storage card from the dashcam. Matthew It turns out the person responsible was Curly, a senior leader at Pegasus Tech, in charge of the AI systems of the downed aircraft. Matthew examined the pertinent records and discovered that following the debut of the Adrian 800 model half a year ago, 3 occurrences arose due to malfunctioning stall prevention systems. Meant to lower the nose of the craft when the attack angle is excessive, the system, as one aviator claims, seems unrefined and may wrongly contend with the pilot for command, heightening the danger of mishaps. Matthew realized this might be the primary cause of this tragedy. Adrian Company rushed the 800 model to market despite the system's immaturity to gain a competitive edge. The pilot hinted to Matthew that the higher-ups at Adrian had connections with the certification committee, which might explain how they passed the safety certification. This made Matthew think of his wife, who was a member of the certification committee and had recently switched to Adrian for an important position. He began to suspect his wife might be involved and questioned her about it. She firmly told him that the certification process was compliant, but since non-compliance reports were confidential, she couldn't reveal more to Matthew. Feeling helpless, Matthew decided to investigate on his own while his wife was asleep. And obtained the test flight report of the 800 passenger plane. The report shows that the anti-stall system does have a delay problem. With this report, Matthew finally convinced his superiors to restart the investigation of the accident. However, his wife was fired over a confidential leak, which led to a heated argument between the two. Nevertheless, Matthew always believed that it was more important to restore the truth for the families of the 300 victims. After breaking up with his wife, Matthew devoted himself to the simulation test of the 800 passenger plane. But no matter how he tested the anti-stall system, the result was that everything was normal. Matthew felt completely devastated because not only did this cost his girlfriend his job, but he was eventually transferred from the group and stayed at home depressed all day. On this day, when he was talking on the phone, a harsh noise suddenly came from the microphone, and then his nephew's drone suddenly lost control and flew away. It turned out that someone played a prank and hacked into the remote control system of the drone. This scene inspired Matthew. He revisited the recording and realized that the piercing noise might not be static interference, but... With sudden insight, he realized that Adrian's aircraft's cybersecurity was Pegasus Technologies' responsibility, and Locke had met secretly with Pegasus's boss Curly before disappearing. Matthew immediately found Curly and voiced his doubts, but Curly explained that the systems for the aircraft's control network and the passenger entertainment network were separate and couldn't be hacked. However, Matthew had done his homework. Though the networks were different, they used the same single optical fiber transmission technology. Once a hacker identified this fiber, they could easily invade the control system. He suspected Curly had Locke modify the black box recordings to mislead the investigation team. Matthew was immediately kicked out by Curly after he said this, but he remained convinced of his theory. Through his investigation, he learned that a hacking attempt had been made a year ago. At that time, a bald man had tampered with an engine speed control on a certain website, and coincidentally, the bald man later worked at Pegasus Technologies. But just 3 months into the job, he was fired and then disappeared without a trace. Matthew quickly checked the boarding list, finding no trace of the bald man, but he did note passenger photos uploaded to social media before the crash. To his surprise, he spotted the bald man due to Adrian's network security. A passenger uploaded a photo to social media before the accident and unexpectedly captured Baldhead's figure. Since Pegasus Tech handles Adrian Keki's network security, Matthew speculated that Baldhead might be retaliating against Pegasus. However, his idea was not supported by the leaders, and he was officially notified of his dismissal. As he was packing up to leave, he unexpectedly found a new file on his computer with a modification timestamp of the night Roke went missing. Besides himself, only Roke had access to this computer. Matthew immediately analyzed the audio file and discovered that Roke had left him a series of numbers. He entered the numbers into the car's navigation system and found a location coordinate near a small lake by Roke's suburban residence. Matthew drove to the lakeside and eventually retrieved a box from the lakebed, which contained a recording storage chip from a black box. Upon opening it, he found the complete black box recording, which was very clear. It started with Baldhead infiltrating the network system and controlling the plane, making the captain promptly disable autopilot and start manual control. Baldhead slipped back into the system, reverted to autopilot and locked it, which made the anti-stall system get faulty signals. Manipulative control, but Baldy invaded the system again, switched to autopilot mode and locked it, causing the anti-stall system to receive erroneous signals, and the plane began to dive rapidly. The captain tried to pull the control lever several times, but the plane was completely out of control. At this moment, Baldy also realized the danger and tried to cancel the autopilot mode, but the system did not respond at all, and the computer finally crashed. Baldy originally just wanted to expose this loophole. Let Pegasus suffer losses, but unexpectedly caused a huge disaster. In the end, there is a video from Locke to Matthew, telling him that he had been bribed by Curly long ago. Initially, he provided some unimportant data, but later, he was asked to modify report data. This time, he was required to edit the recordings, making it look like human factors were involved, framing an innocent terrorist organization. He wanted to refuse, but he was already controlled by Curly, knowing he couldn't escape death. Thus, he came up with this plan to reveal the truth through Matthew. Just as Matthew was about to leave, he heard footsteps in the distance, realizing someone was approaching. For safety, he quickly sent the evidence to his girlfriend, cut off the power, and escaped the room under the cover of darkness, hurriedly driving away. But soon, the room, and quickly got into the car and galloped away. But soon he found a vehicle following and they hacked into Matthew's car's autopilot system. His vehicle lost control and crashed into a big tree, and Matthew was killed on the spot. However, after his girlfriend got the evidence, she played that video at Pegasus Technologies' press conference, and the truth finally came out to the world. Matthew single-handedly exposed the shady scene of Capitol and restored the truth for 300 victims, but he paid the price of his own life. In this story, the black box is not only a product of technology, but also a philosophical metaphor. It stores not only flight data and sound recordings, but also human fears when facing the unknown, choice in the face of crisis, courage in the face of the truth. Matthew's story makes us rethink that in this world woven by data and algorithms, true